a substance is going to move from one place to another place or one cell to another cell, it actually needs ATP. Why the need of ATP is basically going to be required there? Basically, the active transport deals with the movement of substances from low concentration region to high concentration region. You can say hello Bandhugan, Namaskar and welcome back to my YouTube channel Sahil Equations. Today we will be discussing about the diffusion and osmosis. Okay, so before discussing about the diffusion and osmosis, you have to understand about the transport, that why this diffusion and osmosis is required in the biological processes. In biological processes, basically, substances move from one place to another place, substances move from one cell to another cell, and in that case, you need to transport or you need to transfer the substances, whatever, whether it is solute or solvent, you need to transport it from one cell to another cell or from one part of the body to another part of the body. So basically this is a part of transport. So in case of transport, if you understand the concept of transport, then it is basically divided into two types. So transport is basically divided into two parts. One is active transport and another one is passive transport. So what is active transport now? Active transport basically deals with the utilization of ATP. Whenever any substance is going to move from one place to another place or one cell to another cell, it actually needs ATP. Why the need of ATP is basically going to be required there? Basically, the active transport deals with the movement of substances from low concentration region to high concentration region. You can say that the substances, whether it is solutes or any other substance, the solutes are basically moving from the low concentration region to high concentration region, and it is a kind of movement in which you can see that you can see that the solutes are going to move against the concentration gradient. That is why the requirement of ATP can be seen here. So when ATP is required to transport something from low concentration region to high concentration region, this can be called as active transport. And in case of passive transport, just opposite things are going to happen. That is, the substances are going to move from high concentration region to a low concentration region. Basically, this is a passive transport, and this kind of transport does not involve any kind of expenditure of ATP or energy. So, no ATP required in this case. Now, the passive transports are all again going to be divided into two different types. Let's see. So the passive transport can be divided into two types. One is facilitated diffusion and another one is simple diffusion. So to understand the concept of facilitated diffusion and simple diffusion, you have to know about what is diffusion basically. So diffusion basically deals with the movement of solute particles from high concentration region to a lower concentration region without any ATP expenditure, without any involvement of membrane. If the membrane is present there, there is no problem, but membrane is basically not required in case of diffusion. So, what does the diffusion means? The diffusion means the movement of solute particles from high concentration region to a region of its lower concentration. So, let's see. This is a chamber. You kept a copper sulfate there and added some water. The blue color will diffuse from this part to the lower concentration of the copper sulfate. So concentration of copper sulfate is high at this region and concentration of copper sulfate is low at this region. And now, as the process of diffusion says that the copper sulfate is a solute particle and solute particle is going to move from high concentration region to the lower concentration region till the whole solution, the whole water is going to become blue, as the blue color of copper sulfate has been added to the water. So this was basically diffusion. Now what is osmosis? So osmosis is basically the diffusion of solvent particles. There is no movement of solute particles in case of osmosis. Whenever you talk about osmosis, you cannot say that the osmosis is going to deal with the diffusion of solute particle. So we have left one thing here, that the facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion, now again, diffusion or movement of solute particles from the higher concentration region to the lower concentration region. So what is the basic difference between simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion? So facilitated diffusion basically deals like this. There is a membrane having some transporter proteins, or you can say some kind of junctions. This protein is basically going to transport, suppose, sodium ion from the inside of the cell to outside of the cell. When the sodium ions are going to get transported with the help of this transporter proteins across the cell membrane, then you can only say that the diffusion is facilitated diffusion. Hope the concept is clear now. Let's talk about the osmosis. So osmosis is basically the diffusion of solvent particles. There is no movement of solute. Only the movement of solvent particles are going to be considered as in the process of osmosis. So let's see that osmosis looks like. So basically, I have written two definitions of osmosis. Let's deal with the first one first. The osmosis says in the first definition that the osmosis is the movement of solvent, whether it is alcohol or ether or something else. We are going to take the water as a solvent here, a very common example of solvent. So osmosis is the movement of solvent, which is water, from the less concentrated solution to a high concentrated solution. Focus upon these words. Less concentrated solution to high concentrated solution through a semi-permeable membrane till the equilibrium. So there are some basic things that needs to be written in the